Hey, we are two Star Wars nerds, and today we are talking about George Lucas himself today and his world building, his rules, and why it all matters. Okay, so this is really cool. There's this old interview that we watched with George Lucas and Bill Moyers. I've actually read this before, but I'd never watched it. I'd read excerpts and things. So it's the mythology of Star Wars. George Lucas and Bill Moyers. It's really, really fascinating. The whole thing is great.
Yeah.
Bill Moyers has an ability in this interview to ask really great questions. He really looks up to Joseph Campbell. So there's a really good dialogue about Star Wars and the myth and all of this. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of gold in here, but one part in particular that was fascinating that we're all going to watch together was about George and world building, the rules he creates. And so we're going to watch it, share some thoughts because it's very, very interesting. So let's check this out.
Ability you have to cope, like dreaming.
The underwater world, for example, in The Phantom Menace, looks as if it's a dream. Where did that idea come from? Out of your own fantasy?
You know, part of it is where can I go that I haven't been before? And underwater was one of those places I hadn't been before. But I wanted to create a very special, sophisticated, but organic kind of society down there. We were using a kind of technology which had to be completely worked out. How do these bubbles exist under there? Where do they come from? What do they use for energy? The whole culture has to be designed. What do they believe in? How do they operate? What are the economics of the culture? Most of it doesn't appear in the movie, but you have to have thought it through. Otherwise, there's something always rings very untrue or phony about what it is that's going on. And one of the things I struggle for is to create a kind of immaculate realism in a totally unreal and fantasy world. It's a science that I can make up, but once I make up a rule, then I have to live with it.
Such as the world according to George.
Well, I mean, one of the rules is that there's sound in space. So there's sound in space. I can't suddenly have spaceships flying around without any sound anymore because I've already done it. And I've established that as one of the rules of my galaxy, and I have to live with that.
And this goes on for quite a while, and it just keeps going into further and further points. But I'm so thankful that he thinks through things like that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, share some of your thoughts. I know especially the Gungan part, you like. But yeah, just share some of your thoughts.
When we were watching this the other day, I really liked this. It's not a scene, part of the interview, because I've always, I guess maybe I haven't always said it out loud, but thought that was Star Wars. It's so deep. Even the world building and the character background, and it's crazy because I've always thought this has really been thought out. Mm-hmm. And you can see it in the authentic, like he said, if it wasn't, it wouldn't be authentic. And so I think when stories aren't thought out and it's just we just need the bare minimum to get the story out, that's when we are this doesn't seem I'm not buying into your story here because you haven't really thought about it. Whereas George has thought about it, maybe even more than he needed to, but
true.
But I appreciate it because it makes it more enjoyable for me because I can be more immersed in the story. Because like he said, that maybe it doesn't talk about all that in the movies and it's never said, but I don't know, there's just it feels more complete, and it doesn't feel like he's just threw up this cool little underwater city, didn't really think about it, just looking for it to look cool, for it to use CGI. He had depth to it, and I think that's gonna make it look better. It's gonna make it translate better to the audience, and it makes you more invested in the story. At least it does for me.
Yeah, and especially with the Gungan city part, what's interesting is like, how do these bubbles work? What's the economics down here? There's a civilization. What's their culture like? And it really like a big trope I really dislike in film and TV is when a character has to like explain something to the viewers, but they usually do it where it's like there's the character who's like, I don't understand what's happening. What do you mean? Blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And then the other one's like, well, let me tell you out of my knowledge base. And it's to just cover the fact that it's like, yeah, this doesn't really make sense, but let's progress the story. But like when Qui-Gon is there with Boss Nass and Obi and Jar Jar and all this, he's like, hey, I saved his life. Like he owes me a life debt. There's no context for that up until that point.
Right.
And you're like, what do you mean a life debt, right? It's because there's this underlying culture. And so you literally almost feel like you're following real people in real worlds. And then it's like, you know, that's how, you know, even right next to me, I can do it. I have a bunch of junk on it. Oh, this is a 3-volume encyclopedia set where it's like, just like ridiculous amounts of info about things where you're like, I do not need this much info about all these subjects, but it's there. Like,
but then it also makes, it doesn't just keep the story within what you're watching on the movie. It's like, okay, well now we can write books on, not us, but but they can write books or create shows based off specific, like there could be like a Gungan City show, you know, like life, like a sitcom of
life in Gungan City Nights or something.
It's like Uta Gunga or something, right?
Yeah. The Real Housewives of Uta Gunga.
But that, like, and then, you know, that's why there's so many books, is because he's established this deep world. Like, it's not just surface level. And so really it makes not only what you're currently watching or reading more enjoyable, it gives room for a lot more. Yeah,
and what I appreciate, especially when it comes to the sound and space, right? When it goes past the world building sandbox of like, okay, here's all the room for lore and here's all the room for possibilities. When it goes into things like TIE fighters and Millennium Falcon, all this stuff happens in space and there's sound. He doesn't go for the hard science fiction realism. He's more interested in a fantasy world, but in like the entertainment, the mythology. Like, I want this and I want to communicate this way. And there's, I think for the hard science fiction, there's a trilogy of books. It's called the Mars trilogy. And I know I bring this up with you all the time, but like, it's such hard science fiction that it's like real science integrated into this story, where you can literally learn real world application science from this. And some of it was groundbreaking. This isn't a video on that. But George doesn't take that approach. But then I like how he's like, but I made the rules and I have to keep it. Another show we like, I don't know, it's kind of a guilty pleasure for me.
The Office?
Yes. The world building of The Office. No. Once Upon a Time is another show. And I know that the writers, you know, I could touch on Lost. I love Lost. But I think my biggest gripe with Once Upon a Time is exactly what George is talking about here. Where I feel like in that show, if you've ever seen it, magic is a cure-all for everything. Anytime there's something that needs to be explained and it doesn't make sense, it's got to be magic, you know? And it just seems like sometimes they just write themselves into these crazy predicaments, but then you're like trying to make sense of it all. And it's like, well, the mystery of magic. And it just like, you're like, come on again. This is like the 8th time you've used that, you know, to get yourself out of a tight place. But I like that George is like, no, we have to abide by these rules. You could not like the rules, but they're there and there's consistency.
Right.
Yeah, so no, it's...
Well, because then if you changed it, then it's like the viewer is going to be taken out.
Yeah.
And it's going to kind of like possibly ruin the story.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and that's where, I mean, especially like pre-Disney, like George Lucas era stuff. Now, it's not that it's all perfect, you know, but there's a consistency with it, and it makes sense, and there's a continuity that makes sense, and it just feels like a big playground where you can just have a lot of fun with all sorts of things. I encourage you, if you haven't, go watch the Bill Moyer George Lucas interview. You can find it on, it's probably on YouTube somewhere, but you can find it on like the Internet Library, archive.org. You can like watch it. I'm glad that it's been like documented and archived, because it's full of gold. It seriously is. But with that, check out this playlist for more videos you would enjoy. We are two Star Wars nerds. May the Force be with you always.